"Watch out with that wine, sir. Don't drink." The words came from behind him, so sharp and sudden that Harrison Whitfield nearly lost his grip on the crystal stem in his right hand. For a fraction of a second he thought the voice had come from inside his own head, the way certain warnings sometimes arrived unbidden when a man had lived long enough to have collected a lifetime of enemies. But this voice had come from the doorway, and it belonged to a child. He was standing at the head of the long mahogany dining table in the formal room of Whitfield Hall, the crystal glass of 1978 Shade Margox raised perhaps 6 inches above the white linen. His sommelier had poured it exactly 40 seconds earlier from a bottle uncorked in front of the guests. 14 people stood at their places around the table waiting for him to complete the toast he had just begun. A silver candelabra threw soft light across their faces. Somewhere in the distance, the grandfather clock in the front hall marked the quarter hour with a single low chime. Harrison turned slowly. The boy was standing 3 paces inside the wide double doors of the dining room, one small hand resting against the polished frame, his shoulders held very still in the way that a rabbit holds itself when it has not yet decided whether the fox in front of it will see the trembling if it does not move. He was perhaps 9 years old, maybe 10, in a clean gray hooded sweatshirt that was 2 sizes too large and dark jeans, washed so many times they had forgotten what color they had once been. Harrison recognized him after a moment. The boy's mother had joined the kitchen staff 6 weeks earlier, taken on during preparations for the autumn benefit gala at the request of the head cook, and she had begun bringing the child with her on the evenings, when whatever arrangement she had made for him elsewhere had not been possible. Harrison had nodded at him twice in the hallway outside the pantry. He had never spoken to him. The 14 guests at the table had turned to look. Their expressions ranged from mild curiosity to the polite, careful blankness that people of a certain social standing arrange on their faces when something unexpected happens in a room where nothing unexpected is supposed to happen. A woman in emerald silk near the middle of the table gave a small nervous laugh and then, seeing that no one else laughed with her, let it die in her throat. "What did you say?" Harrison asked. The boy did not look away. There was fear in his face, but it was not the ordinary fear of a child who had wandered into a room he did not belong in. It was the deeper, more considered fear of a child who understood exactly what he was doing and had chosen to do it anyway. "Watch out with that wine, sir," he said again, more clearly this time. "Please, I saw something. There's something wrong with it." Harrison did not move. He was 71 years old. He was the founder and chairman of Whitfield Industries, a private holding company whose interests in shipping, commercial real estate, and specialty chemicals had earned him a place on financial lists. He pretended not to read, and a great many enemies he pretended not to have. He had been threatened in his office in 1994 by a man with a knife. He had been sued twice by governments and 11 times by competitors. He had been shot at once from a rooftop in Marseille in the spring of 1989. He had never in any of those moments spilled a glass of wine, and he did not spill one now. He set the crystal glass down on the white linen with the deliberate, unhurried motion of a man who had built his entire fortune on never being seen to react. "Son," he said in the calm, level voice he reserved for negotiations that mattered. "Come here a moment. Walk slowly. Don't run. What is your name?" "Malachi, sir." "Malachi Reed." "Malachi, would you come and stand next to me, please?" The boy hesitated. His eyes flickered once quickly toward the tall man in white gloves standing behind Harrison's chair. It was the smallest movement, the kind of glance that a person would miss unless they had spent their life reading the small movements of eyes across boardroom tables and negotiation floors. Harrison did not miss it. The boy walked across the long stretch of polished floor until he was standing perhaps 2 feet from Harrison's chair. The dining room had gone completely silent. 14 guests, 3 staff members, and one small boy who smelled faintly of the lemon soap the kitchen used, all of them holding their breath at the same time. "Malachi," Harrison said in the same calm voice, though he had lowered it now so that only the two of them could hear it. "I would like you to tell me what you saw. Take your time. Speak clearly. Do not be afraid." The boy did not turn his head. He kept his eyes fixed on Harrison's face, and he spoke in a voice that was quiet but did not shake. "I was carrying the linens from the pressing room to the pantry, sir. I take the back stairs because my mama told me not to be in the front hallways during a party. I was passing the bar station, the little one behind the folding door where they open the bottles before they bring them to the table. And I saw a man standing there. He had his back to me. He didn't hear me because I was walking soft the way my mama tells me to walk." Harrison did not look at the sommelier. He did not need to. He could feel the tall man's stillness behind him, the particular stillness of someone who had stopped breathing. "Go on." "He had the bottle open on the counter, sir. Not this one. Another one. And he had a small thing in his hand, a little glass tube with a stopper on it. He tipped the tube into the bottle, just a small amount. Then he put the stopper back on the tube and put the tube in his jacket pocket. And then he picked up the bottle and poured a little bit of the wine into the sink and washed it down. Then he wiped the outside of the bottle with a napkin and carried it out to the dining room." The boy paused. He swallowed once. "I know I'm not supposed to be in the halls when there's a party, sir. But I stood there and I watched him do it, and I couldn't move because I didn't understand what I had seen. Then when I understood, I ran. I ran the whole way from the pantry to here. I'm sorry I came in without asking. I didn't know how else to tell you." Harrison Whitfield sat perfectly still. He had been prepared, in some deep private compartment of himself, for the boy to say that he had seen something spilled, something dirty, something ordinary. He had not been prepared for what the boy had actually said. The words landed in the small cold place at the center of his chest, where certain kinds of information always landed. The place that had told him in 1989 to duck 3 seconds before the shot from the Marseille rooftop had passed through the window behind him. The woman in emerald silk had gone very pale. The man to her left, a partner in a downtown law firm, had set his own glass down on the linen without seeming to notice that he had done so. Down the length of the table, one by one, the 14 guests were becoming aware of the shape of the sentence the boy had just delivered, and their faces were arranging themselves into the careful blankness of people who had not yet decided what was going to be required of them. Harrison did not turn to look at the sommelier behind his chair. He did not raise his voice. He simply reached out with his right hand and laid it, palm down, on the linen beside the untouched glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison said, and his voice carried the way it had carried in boardrooms for 50 years, calm and level and impossible to interrupt. "I am going to ask all of you to remain seated for a moment. There is no cause for alarm. There is, however, cause for care." He did not stand. He did not raise his hand. He simply spoke, and the 14 guests around the table settled into their chairs the way people settle when a man they have known for decades has told them, in the voice they have learned to trust, that something is now his to handle. "Mr. Corbin," Harrison said without turning his head. The tall man behind his chair took half a breath before he answered. "Yes, sir. Please step forward and stand where I can see you." There was a pause of perhaps 2 seconds. Then the sommelier walked around the side of Harrison's chair and took a position beside the small serving cart at the head of the table. He was a man in his early 50s with graying temples and the neat, composed features of someone who had spent most of his adult life pouring wine for people wealthier than himself. He had been employed at Whitfield Hall for 11 years. Harrison had recommended him personally for a Wine Industry Award in 2019. He had attended Harrison's daughter's wedding as a guest, not as staff. He was pale now, but his hands did not shake. Harrison noticed both things and stored them. "Mr. Corbin," Harrison said in the same calm voice, "would you kindly hand me the bottle of Chateau Margaux that you opened this evening, the corked bottle, along with the cork and the opener you used? Please place them here on the table beside my glass. Do not pour anything further. Do not touch the glass I have already been served. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." The sommelier turned to the cart. He lifted the bottle with the careful, practiced motion of a man who had lifted 10,000 bottles in his career, and he placed it on the linen beside Harrison's glass. He set the cork down beside it. He set the small silver opener down beside the cork. He did all of this without meeting Harrison's eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Corbin. Now I would like you to remain standing exactly where you are. Do not leave this room. Do not put your hands in your pockets. Do not reach into your jacket. If you feel the need to sit, there is a chair against the wall behind you. You may use it, but I would prefer that you remain in this room in my sight until the matter that has just been raised has been resolved." The sommelier did not answer. He nodded once, a small, tight nod. His hands hung at his sides, and Harrison saw that he had folded his thumbs inward against his palms, the way certain people did when they were trying very hard not to let their hands betray them. Harrison turned to the woman in emerald silk, who was seated at the middle of the table. Her name was Judith Ellery. She was 74 years old, a retired federal magistrate judge, and she had been a friend of Harrison's late wife for 40 years. "Judith," he said quietly, "would you do me the kindness of calling my head of security? His name is Mr. Prescott. There is a house phone on the credenza behind you. Press the button marked 7. When he answers, tell him I have asked that he come to the dining room immediately with 2 of his men, and that he is to bring the small evidence case from the safe in his office. Tell him also to lock the service exits at the rear of the house." Judith Ellery did not ask a single question. She rose from her chair with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had spent 30 years on the bench issuing instructions of exactly this weight, and she crossed to the credenza. Harrison turned his attention back to the small boy standing beside him. "Malachi," Harrison said, and his voice softened by a fraction that no one at the table would have noticed except perhaps the boy himself. "Would you like to sit down? There is a chair here beside me. It has been empty all evening, and I would be glad of the company." The boy hesitated. He looked toward the doorway once, the small reflexive glance of a child who understood that his presence in this room was a violation of every rule his mother had taught him about houses like this one. "My mama will be looking for me, sir. Your mother is going to be very proud of you tonight, Malachi, but she will not know why for a little while yet. Will you sit with me until Mr. Prescott arrives? I would prefer that you remain close by. There are certain questions that only you can answer, and I would rather ask them here in this room where everyone can hear them than in a smaller room later where they cannot." The boy nodded. He climbed carefully into the tall dining chair beside Harrison's, the chair that had belonged to Harrison's wife before she had died 6 years ago, and that had remained empty at every dinner Harrison had hosted since. His small feet did not reach the floor. He placed his hands in his lap and sat very straight, the way a boy sits when he has been raised by a woman who takes pride in how her son carries himself. Harrison turned to the guest seated to his right, a man named Frederick Vance, who was the chief operating officer of Whitfield Industries and who had been Harrison's closest business partner for 28 years. "Frederick," Harrison said quietly, "I would like you to place a call to Peter Halloran on my behalf. Use the phone in the library. Tell him that I need him at the house within the hour. Tell him to bring the small satchel. He will know which one. Do not use my private line. Do not call from your own phone. Use the house line in the library and use only the direct number I have given you for his cottage, not the office number." Frederick Vance rose from his seat without a word. He had known Harrison long enough to understand that when Harrison asked for the small satchel, the matter had already crossed a certain line, and no time was to be wasted in pretending it had not. Judith Ellery returned from the credenza and resumed her seat. "Mr. Prescott is on his way," she said quietly. 2 minutes. "Thank you, Judith." The dining room held its breath. 12 remaining guests, one sommelier standing very still beside a serving cart, one small boy in a gray hooded sweatshirt sitting beside the empty chair of a dead woman, and one old man with his palm resting flat on white linen beside a crystal glass of wine that no one was going to drink. Harrison turned his head very slightly so that he could speak to Malachi without seeming to speak to him. "Malachi, the man you saw at the bar station, was he alone?" "Yes, sir." "Just him? Are you certain?" "Yes, sir. The folding door was open on my side. I could see all the way to the back wall. There was no one else in there." "And when he had finished, did he go anywhere before he came back into the dining room?" The boy paused. He thought carefully. Harrison could see him thinking, running the memory backward in his head, taking his time in exactly the way a builder's son had been taught to take his time with a measurement. "He stopped at the doorway, sir, before he came out. He pulled out his phone and looked at it for a second, then he put it away, and then he walked out with the bottle. He looked at his phone. Yes, sir, just for a second, like he was checking a message. Harrison sat with this for a moment. He was no longer looking at the sommelier. He was looking at the small painting of a spaniel that hung on the far wall of the dining room, a painting his wife had loved. Mr. Prescott arrived in the doorway 2 minutes and 11 seconds later. He was a broad, quiet man of 62, a former officer of the state police who had come to work for Harrison in 2004, and who ran the security of Whitfield Hall with the unhurried competence of a man who had seen every kind of trouble a house of this size could produce. He was accompanied by 2 of his men, both in dark suits, and he was carrying a small black case in his left hand. He took in the room in a single glance. The bottle, the glass, the sommelier standing beside the serving cart, the boy sitting beside Harrison, the 14 guests in their careful stillness. He did not ask a single question. "Mr. Prescott," Harrison said, "please seal this room. No one is to enter or leave. My guests will remain at the table. Mr. Corbin will remain where he is standing. I would like you to take the bottle, the cork, the opener, and the glass in front of me into the evidence case, and I would like you to do it now, in front of witnesses, so that the chain of custody begins in this room and can be attested to by every person in it." "Yes, sir." Prescott set the case on the linen at the foot of the table. He drew on a pair of thin white gloves from an inner pocket, and he took from the case 4 sealed evidence bags, each labeled in advance with the small, neat handwriting of a man who had learned long ago to prepare more of everything than he thought he would need. He lifted the crystal glass first. He did not touch the rim. He did not touch the bowl. He held it by the base and lowered it carefully into the largest of the bags, and he sealed the bag with a piece of tape that he initialed and dated. He held the bag up so that everyone at the table could see the label, the seal, and the wine still moving inside the glass. He did the same with the bottle. He did the same with the cork. He did the same with the small silver opener. He placed all 4 sealed bags into the evidence case, closed the lid, and set his palm on the top for a moment before he lifted his eyes to Harrison. "Sir, may I ask the reason?" "Malachi," Harrison said quietly, "would you tell Mr. Prescott what you told me a few minutes ago, in the same words if you can?" The boy sat up a little straighter in the tall chair. He looked at Mr. Prescott the way he had looked at Harrison without flinching, and he told the story again from the beginning. The linens from the pressing room, the back stairs, the folding door of the bar station, the tall man with his back turned, the small glass tube with the stopper on it, the tip of the tube into the bottle, the stopper going back, the tube into the jacket pocket, the pouring of the small amount into the sink, the washing of it down, the wiping of the outside of the bottle, the phone at the doorway, the check of the message, the walk out to the dining room. Prescott listened without interrupting. When the boy had finished, he stood for perhaps 3 seconds without moving. Then he turned his head very slowly and looked at the sommelier for the first time since he had entered the room. "Mr. Corbin," he said in a voice that was almost gentle, "I am going to ask you to place both of your hands flat on the top of that serving cart, palms down, fingers spread. Do it slowly. Do it now." The sommelier did as he was told. "Wilkins," Prescott said to the taller of his 2 men, "check his jacket pockets. Left inside pocket first. Use gloves." The taller man drew on gloves. He stepped forward. He reached, with the deliberate care of a man performing a search that would be watched on video later, into the inside left pocket of the sommelier's dark jacket. He drew out a small glass tube with a stopper on it. The tube was perhaps the length of a man's little finger. It was made of clear glass, with a small black rubber stopper pushed firmly into the top. It was almost, but not quite, empty. There was a residue at the bottom, a thin film of clear liquid that clung to the inside of the glass in the way that certain oils cling, refusing to run. Wilkins held it up so that the light of the chandelier caught it. Then he lowered it into a small evidence bag, sealed it, initialed the seal, and passed the bag to Mr. Prescott. Prescott placed it in the case beside the bottle and the glass. There was a sound from the middle of the table. It was small, the kind of sound that a person makes when they have been holding a breath for too long and have finally allowed it to leave them. It came from Judith Ellery. She was looking at the sommelier with an expression Harrison had seen on her face perhaps twice in 40 years. It was not shock. It was not anger. It was the flat, tired recognition of a woman who had spent 30 years watching men lie about smaller things than this and who was no longer capable of being surprised by any of it. Harrison did not look at the sommelier. He looked at the boy in the chair beside him. Malachi, you did exactly right. I want you to remember that. Whatever happens in this room in the next few minutes, whatever the grown-ups do or say, you did exactly right. Do you hear me? Yes, sir. Good. He turned then, and for the first time in the evening, he looked directly at the sommelier. His voice did not rise. It did not sharpen. It simply carried the weight of 45 years spent in rooms where the truth had to be extracted from men who did not want to surrender it. Mr. Corbin, I have known you for 11 years. My late wife recommended you to me. You have poured wine at my daughter's wedding. You have poured wine at my grandson's christening. You have stood in my cellar and named the vintages of bottles my father laid down before you were born. I am not going to ask you why. Not yet. That is a question I will ask when your attorney is present and my attorney is present and the state's attorney is present. What I am going to ask you now is a smaller question, and I would advise you to answer it truthfully, because the answer will determine whether the rest of your life is lived under a heavier weight than it has to be. Who paid you? The sommelier did not answer. His hands remained flat on the top of the serving cart. His eyes were fixed on the far wall behind Harrison, on a point above the painting of the spaniel that his late wife had loved. His jaw was tight and there was a small muscle moving at the corner of it. Mr. Corbin, look at me. The sommelier looked at him. I am not asking for a confession. I am asking for a name. If you give me the name now, in this room, in front of these witnesses, I will make sure that fact is recorded, and I will make sure it is considered by every court and every prosecutor who touches your file for the rest of the time this matter is in front of them. If you do not give me the name now, we will find it another way. We will find it through your phone records. We will find it through your bank accounts. We will find it through the message you checked at the doorway of the bar station tonight. But we will find it. And the difference between finding it with your help and finding it without your help is the difference between a man who cooperated and a man who did not. Do you understand what I am saying to you? The sommelier's eyes filled slowly. He did not weep, but the tears gathered at the edges without falling, and Harrison saw them, and he waited. For a long moment the sommelier did not speak. Then he closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, something had gone out of his face. It was not defiance that left. It was the last small hope that he might yet find a way out of the room without saying what he was about to say. Mercer, he said. His voice was hoarse. Daniel Mercer. The room did not move. But something in it shifted, the way the air shifts in a house when a distant door has been opened. Harrison Whitfield did not blink. He did not turn to look at anyone at the table. He simply held the sommelier's eyes with the same calm attention he had held them with since Mr. Prescott had walked into the room. Daniel Mercer, he repeated quietly, the chief financial officer of Whitfield Industries. Yes, sir. When did he approach you? 6 weeks ago, sir, at my apartment. He came in the evening. He knew things about me that he should not have known. Things about my brother. Things about the debt my brother owes. He said he could make the debt go away. He said all I had to do was pour 1 glass of wine at one dinner. He said no one would know. He said the substance was untraceable, that it would look like a heart attack, that a man of your age and history would not be questioned. How much? $2 million, sir, half in advance, half after. Was the half in advance paid? Yes, sir, 3 weeks ago. To an account he set up for me in the Cayman Islands. I have not touched it. I could not touch it. Every time I looked at the balance I could not breathe. Harrison sat very still. The name Daniel Mercer had lived inside the walls of Whitfield Industries for 19 years. Mercer had come to the company as a senior accountant in 2007. He had risen to controller in 2011, to vice president of finance in 2015, and to chief financial officer in 2020. He had a wife and 3 children. He owned a house on the North Shore that Harrison had attended a Christmas party at twice. He had stood beside Harrison at the ribbon cutting for the new terminal in Savannah in 2022, and he had made a small joke in his speech about how the terminal had come in under budget only because the accountants had been meaner than the engineers, and everyone had laughed, and Harrison had laughed with them. Harrison turned his head very slightly and spoke to Mr. Prescott without taking his eyes off the sommelier. "Prescott, Mr. Mercer is not in this house tonight. He was invited. He declined at the last moment this afternoon, citing a family matter. I want 2 of your men at his residence within the hour. I do not want him arrested. Not yet. I want him watched. I want to know where he is, who he speaks to, and what he does between now and the moment I decide otherwise. If he attempts to leave the country, he is to be stopped. Not by your men, by the appropriate authorities. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir. Frederick." Harrison did not raise his voice, but Frederick Vance had already returned to the doorway of the dining room from his call to Peter Halloran, and he stepped forward now with the same steady attention he had brought to 28 years of Harrison's harder decisions. "Yes, Harrison, Peter is on his way. He should arrive within 30 minutes. Good. When he arrives, bring him directly to the small parlor, not to the dining room. I will meet him there. In the meantime, I want you to contact Nathaniel Rye at the SEC. Use his personal number, not the office. Tell him I will need to speak with him tomorrow morning at 7. Tell him it concerns a senior officer of Whitfield Industries and that I would prefer the conversation take place at his residence rather than at his office." "Yes." Harrison turned back to the sommelier. The tears had fallen now. "Mr. Corbin," Harrison said, and his voice was not gentle, but it was no longer hard. "You have made yourself a small and useful piece of a larger truth tonight. That does not undo what you agreed to do. It does not return the money you accepted. It does not remove the fact that you carried a bottle into this room with the intention of ending my life. But it does, in the small mathematics by which such matters are measured, place you on a different side of the line than the man who paid you. Do you have anything else you wish to say to me before Mr. Prescott takes you into custody?" The sommelier's mouth worked for a moment. Then he found the words. "My brother, sir. He does not know. He has never known. If any part of what I am saying can be kept from him for as long as possible, I would ask you that. He is not well. He will not survive knowing that a man tried to be killed on account of what he owes." Harrison considered this. "Your brother will learn what your brother needs to learn in the order and at the pace that the law allows. I will not shield you from the consequences of what you did, but I will not use your brother against you either. That is the best I can offer." "Thank you, sir." "Mr. Prescott." Prescott stepped forward. He did not put handcuffs on the sommelier. He did not need to. He simply took him by the elbow with the quiet firmness of a man who had done this 100 times, and he led him out through the side door of the dining room, and the second of his men followed with the evidence case in his hand. The dining room settled into a new kind of silence. It was not the held-breath silence of the beginning of the evening. It was the exhausted, thoughtful silence of 13 people who had just watched a life come apart at close range, and who understood, without needing to speak of it, that they had also just watched another life saved. Harrison turned to his guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I will not ask you to continue your dinner. I will ask instead that each of you remain in the house for another hour. Mr. Prescott's men will take a brief statement from each of you regarding what you have observed in this room this evening. Your statements will be used as part of the record that this matter is beginning tonight. I regret that the celebration I invited you to has become the thing it has become. I regret it more than I can tell you. But I am grateful, more than I can tell you, that you were here to witness it. There is a small library at the end of the west hallway. Coffee and brandy will be served there. I will join you presently." The guests rose slowly. They did not speak. They filed out through the main doorway of the dining room in the quiet, careful way that people leave a room in which something serious has happened, each of them nodding once to Harrison as they passed, each of them glancing once at the small boy in the tall chair beside him. When the last of them had gone, Harrison turned to Malachi. The boy had not moved. His hands were still folded in his lap. His feet still did not reach the floor. His eyes were wide, but they were not frightened. They were the eyes of a child who had just watched something he did not entirely understand, but who knew in the deep and instinctive way that children know such things that he had done a thing that mattered. Malachi. Yes, sir. I would like to meet your mother now. Would you come with me to the kitchen? I would like to introduce myself to her properly, and I would like to tell her in front of you what her son did tonight. The boy nodded. He climbed down from the tall chair. His small hand hovered for a moment at his side, and then, uncertain of what to do with it, he offered it to Harrison. Harrison Whitfield took the small hand in his own. It was warm, and it was steady, and it was the hand of a boy who had walked into a room he did not belong in, and had told a truth that men 3 times his size might not have found the courage to tell. Harrison held it for a moment longer than he needed to, and then together they walked out of the dining room, down the long carpeted hallway toward the back of the house, past the small parlor where Peter Halloran would soon be waiting with his satchel, past the library where 13 shaken guests were being served coffee they would not drink, past the tall windows that looked out onto the garden where the autumn dark had settled over the boxwood hedges, and into the kitchen. Malachi's mother was standing at the long steel counter in the middle of the room. Her name was Rebecca Reed. She was 34 years old. She wore a black apron over a white blouse, and her hair was pulled back into a tight, neat knot at the base of her neck. She had been folding napkins when the door opened, and her hands froze in the folding when she saw her son standing beside the master of the house, his small hand still held in Harrison's. She began to apologize before Harrison had crossed the threshold. She was already saying his name, already saying she was sorry, already reaching for her son with the particular fear of a woman who had spent her whole life knowing that her child in the wrong room of a house like this one could be the end of everything she had built. Mrs. Reed, Harrison said, and his voice was quiet enough to stop her. I am going to ask you to sit down for a moment, please. There is a chair by the window. Would you sit? She looked at him. She looked at her son. She looked back at him. Something in her face was trying very hard to hold itself together in front of a man who had the power to end her employment with a single sentence. Harrison saw the effort, and he lowered his voice further. Your son is not in any trouble. Your son is not in any trouble at all. I have brought him to you because I would like you to hear from me what he did this evening. Would you sit? She sat. Harrison remained standing. He did not release Malachi's hand. He kept it in his own as he spoke, and Rebecca Reed watched her son's small hand held in the hand of Harrison Whitfield with the disbelief of a woman who was not yet able to process what she was seeing. Mrs. Reed, Harrison said, your son saved my life tonight. He was crossing the back hallway with the linens when he witnessed a member of my staff put a substance into a bottle of wine that was to be poured at my table. He understood what he had seen. He ran to the dining room. He walked into a room full of strangers, some of the wealthiest people in this state, and he told me in front of all of them that I should not drink the wine. He was not asked to do it. He was not required to do it. He did it because it was the right thing to do, and because he had been raised to understand that it was the right thing to do. That is your work, Mrs. Reed. Whatever else you have or have not been given in your life, you have raised a son who knows the difference between what is safe and what is right, and who is capable of choosing between them under pressure that would break most grown men. I am here to thank you. I am also here to tell you that from this evening forward, the future of your son and the future of your family will be my personal concern. Rebecca Reed pressed both hands flat against the wooden table. She did not answer. Her eyes were on her son, and her son was looking back at her. The weeks that followed moved with the patient, deliberate weight that only old money and older lawyers can bring to a matter that has been building in silence for months. Daniel Mercer was not arrested at his home that night. Harrison did not believe in noise. He believed in paper. By the end of the first week, every account that Mercer had touched in 19 years at Whitfield Industries had been quietly frozen by a court order that no one inside the company had seen coming. By the end of the second week, 3 separate forensic accounting firms had been brought in to walk backward through 19 years of transactions, and what they found filled 11 bankers' boxes. Daniel Mercer had been embezzling from the company for 6 of those 19 years. The theft had been small at first, and then larger, and then, in the last 18 months, catastrophic. He had lost most of it to a series of bad investments in a hedge fund, run by a man he had gone to college with, a hedge fund that had collapsed in the spring, and he had been staring down a hole he could not fill. He had calculated, in the private mathematics of a desperate man, that the only way out was for Harrison Whitfield to die before the annual audit in November, and for the executor of Harrison's estate to be a man Mercer had spent 3 years positioning himself to become. Mercer pleaded guilty in the winter to 21 of the 34 charges against him. He was sentenced to 27 years in a federal facility. He was 56 years old at the time of sentencing. Harrison did not attend the hearing. He had said everything he needed to say to Daniel Mercer in a single letter, the contents of which were never made public and never will be. The sommelier, Mr. Corbin, cooperated fully with the investigation. His testimony was central to the prosecution of Mercer. He was sentenced in the spring to 11 years, of which he would serve 7. His brother's debt, as it happened, was purchased quietly by a private party 6 months after his sentencing, and the debt was retired. The sommelier was not told who had purchased it. He assumed for the rest of his life that it had been an unknown mercy. He was not entirely wrong. Rebecca Reed did not remain in the kitchen at Whitfield Hall. Harrison offered her a position managing the household staff at half again her previous salary, and she accepted it. Malachi was enrolled the following autumn in a private academy 14 miles from the estate, on a full scholarship funded by a small foundation Harrison established in his late wife's name. The foundation's stated mission was the education of the children of domestic staff, kitchen workers, and building trades laborers across 3 counties. Malachi took to the academy slowly, the way a careful child takes to any new room. By the end of his 2nd year, he was at the top of his class in mathematics and reading 2 grades above his level. By the end of his 4th year, he had asked whether he might one day study medicine, because he had been thinking, in the quiet way that certain boys think about such things, about what it means to notice a thing that other people are not noticing, and about the different kinds of lives that a person can save by paying attention. Harrison Whitfield lived for 9 more years after the evening. The small glass tube came out of a sommelier's jacket pocket in his own dining room. He spent many of those years quietly. He hosted Malachi Reed for lunch every Sunday that the boy was home from school, and they spoke of many things, including harbors and houses, and the small, careful business of paying attention to what other people did not see. If this story moved you, please tap the like button and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that the smallest voice in a room is often the one carrying the truth that everyone else has missed. Subscribe to the channel so the next story finds you, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Never walk past a child who is trying to tell you something. You never know which small voice might one day save your life.